My name is Jeff Nelson. I'm the Executive Director and CEO of the Russell Kirk Center, and on behalf of the Chairman... Oh, thank you. That was worth the last 2 months' worth of work. On behalf of Chairman T. Kenneth Cribb, our Board of Trustees, our President Emerita and co-founder, longtime President Annette Kirk, and our wonderful host committee, it's great to have you here for this evening of conversation on conservatism. To begin, we begin as we must with a Pledge of Allegiance and a prayer. I want to introduce first Noel Vanderbilt from Hope College, who's part of the really amazing Markets and Morality program there at Hope College. It's a signature program run by Dr. Sarah Estelle, and Noel's a big part of that. And Van Leyen from the Ford Leadership Forum at the Gerald R. Ford Presidential Foundation. They'll come up and lead us in the pledge. And then after that, state representative from the 37th District, Niles area, Representative Brad Paquette will lead us in prayer. He's a recent alum of, and really one of the chief organizers of a really amazing and wonderful program on statesmanship and American conservatism, where some really top state legislators and senators came and spent the weekend in Mecosta, and that was really something special. And we're glad to have Brad here to lead us in prayer. But first, the pledge, Noel and Van.
Thank you for remaining standing as we invoke our Lord. Would you bow your heads? Dear Heavenly Father, here we are. We understand that it is by your hand of providence that we gather here today in fellowship around the permanent things. Guide us in your precepts as we contemplate the art of the possible which brings glory only to your holy name. We turn to you, the eternal source of truth, as the winds of worldly doctrine and enticing ideology whirl about us. Lead the lips of our speakers tonight and speak through them as your servants are listening. You've preserved for us a freedom to choose your holy will. It has led us all here as we petition your direction in the preservation of a country that can harbor your blessings for the generations to come. In Jesus' name, amen.
Well, now for the main event, I'd like to welcome to the stage Vice President Mike Pence, Secretary Betsy DeVos. You know their amazing vitae. They are two of the most amazing conservative leaders of our time, principled individuals that have given so much to their country, so much for the cause that we believe in as Christians and conservatives and Republicans and Americans. And we're so grateful to have you with us tonight. It's going to be fun to talk together. So please. Okay. Conversations on conservatism, Grand Rapids style. Well, welcome. This evening we'll be discussing conservative beliefs and approaches on a series of topics. It's worth mentioning that all of us here tonight who call themselves conservative do so because of Russell Kirk. Before his most famous book, The Conservative Mind, was published in 1953, the elite consensus was that there was only one American tradition, and that was the liberal tradition. Kirk showed there was, in fact, another tradition, every bit as serious and respectable as liberalism. It was a tradition of great statesmen, but also of poets, novelists, critics, and journalists, all of whom articulated a uniquely American set of conservative principles. 2 years after the publication of The Conservative Mind, a young William F. Buckley Jr. came into Mecosta to encourage Russell Kirk to write for his new conservative magazine, National Review. The rest is history. And it is this American conservative tradition, forged in those early years, that we will discuss during the next 30 minutes. And I guess I have the first question, right? Because I'm going to stick with the theme I started, Russell Kirk. Vice President Pence, you have noted on a number of occasions that Russell Kirk has been a significant influence on your thought. You actually hosted him in Indiana. Can you share with our guests that story? And in particular, what did reading Russell Kirk teach you?
Well, Jeff, first and foremost, thank you. I want to thank the Russell Kirk Center for Cultural Renewal. America is in need of cultural renewal, and I know that Russell Kirk's wisdom still holds the keys. So thank you all for being here. I'm also delighted to be here with the best Secretary of Education America has ever had. Secretary DeVos, thank you so much. Thanks for your incredible leadership, your ongoing leadership on behalf of education freedom, which really goes to the very heart of the mind and the vision of the man that we'll celebrate today. It's a particular joy. When I was a member of Congress, I actually made a practice of handing out copies of the Conservative Mind to new members of Congress that were coming in, and I had one place to call to get all those copies, and I have to tell you, it is a special joy to be with the timeless advocate of Russell Kirk's work, the infatigable Annette Kirk. Thank you so much for all you've done for the cause and the country. The former Michigan Governor John Engler, who I think invented Midwest conservative reform governors. And Mr. Governor, thank you so much for your great support of the Russell Kirk Center. But thank you for the question. It was 1991. I was running a state think tank in Indiana. Okay, after I'd run for Congress and lost twice.
Time to think.
But I was about 31 years old, and we invited Russell Kirk in what would be the waning years of his life to come to Indiana and speak and give a series of speeches. And I'll never forget, Betsy and I are good friends, as you hopefully will sense at the stage tonight. But I was still forming my conservative philosophies. I was a grandson of an Irish immigrant. I was the son of a combat veteran, a precocious first-generation Irish American. I was raised in a kind of common sense conservative home, but we really didn't think about political philosophy very much around our dinner table, to be quite honest with you. It was faith and family and freedom and patriotism. So I was still learning about the conservative movement and political philosophy when Dr. Kirk came to Indiana. And I remember we were sitting over breakfast at the Holiday Inn just off Highway 46. And there I was, this young, kind of new conservative, looking at Russell Kirk. And literally over eggs and breakfast, Annette, I looked at him and I said, "So how would you describe yourself?" I said, Are you like a conservative? Are you like a libertarian, neoconservative? How would you describe your philosophy? And he smiled the way old men sometimes smile at young men. And he said to me, "I'm a conservative." And of course, I doubled down on it. I said, "So what do you mean by that?" I said, "Could you explain that to me?" And he reached over and he touched my hand at the breakfast table and said, "I just wrote a whole book about it, Mike. I'm going to send you a copy." And the Politics of Prudence, signed by Russell Kirk, was in my mailbox 1 week later. And it's one of my most cherished possessions, a book that we celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Politics of Prudence, a book that I have read more times than I can count and has truly shaped my political philosophy about America and about public service. So thank you for the honor of being here. It's a real joy.
It's a privilege. And maybe this is something, Betsy, you could share your thoughts with Mike. Following on the politics of prudence question, as you know, Kirk begins the politics of prudence by stating that conservatism fundamentally is a disposition of character as opposed to a closed way of thinking, an ideology that claims to have found the final answers to the search for truth. That leads to political fanaticism. How have his warnings against the temptation to turn conservatism into an ideology fared over time?
Well, I think they've been under great pressure in recent years as we've seen our country cleave further and further apart, and each side of the political spectrum taking more and more, I think, hard and fast positions around issues that for most people are matters of preference or matters of personal freedom or however you want to characterize them, versus matters of hard ideology, being conservative or liberal. And we know that our country is in very grave shape today. And so I really appreciate being here with Vice President Pence, who I was his steady hand and great advocacy for the work that we were doing at the Department of Education through the years that we served together was such an encouragement around the core principles of conservatism, not taking left or right turns into these far corners that we see too much of today. And I hope that he and others will help to bring us back together at a political level. But at its core, this is an issue that goes far deeper than the politics and elected officials of the day.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on the question of the connection between sort of political fanaticism, ideology, and the sort of deeper dispositional sense of conservatism?
Well, I think that I've quoted it thousands of times that Russell Kirk talked about prudence being the primary characteristic in public life. And by that, I also think it means civility. I think democracy depends on heavy doses of civility. I think you can stand firmly on principle and still show respect. And I believe America needs to get back to that kind of politics. But also, one of my favorite statements of Russell Kirk was politics is the art of the possible. And that at a time when I think, as Betsy just said, I think our country's in a lot of trouble. I think the Biden administration's policies have weakened America at home and abroad. And if there was ever a time when we ought to be turning back to a politics that's grounded in the permanent things that Russell Kirk spoke about, it's now. Because I'll always believe, and reading Kirk is one of the things that was refreshing about his writings to me, was he's maybe where I became most convinced that there will always be more that unites us in this country than divides us. I mean, our politics is more divided than ever before, but I'm not convinced the American people are as divided as our politics. When you think about across the spectrum, the importance of those permanent things, of faith and family, and voluntary organizations in our communities, and the way that neighbors come alongside neighbors in difficult times. I really do think it is very core. Russell Kirk's vision, the conservative vision, is an optimistic vision for America that believes in the American people. And that's the kind of leadership I believe we need again.
Well said. That leads to the question of defining conservatism. You mentioned your lunch and asking what variety of conservative Dr. Kirk was, which tendency he leaned toward. You yourself have described yourself as a classical conservative. or on occasion a Reagan conservative. How would you describe a classical conservative? Is that a, do you regret adding that adjective? Do you just want to go back to conservative?
That sounds like a hard question. Why don't you just...
I'm not sure I would have a definition for classical conservatism versus conservatism. I mean, I've always just considered myself a conservative. I think the importance of family and faith and freedom is sort of core to our, how we need to be able to live. And I just have to say I really appreciated my brief chat with Annette in the reception beforehand. She said, I prayed for you every day you were in Washington. And she said, I didn't know what else to do. And I said, Annette, that was the most important thing you could do. And I firmly believe that, the prayers of many help embolden those who are in positions of having to do tough things and take tough positions and fight for principles, and then also show respect to others in the process of fighting for those. But it's not real complicated, I don't think. I think at its core, conservatism, all of us in this room know what that means and what it means to us personally.
You're here.
Well, I agree very strongly with what Betsy said. And I know there's a lot of talk about our movement is changing and there's different priorities, but I must tell you, I think that what Russell Kirk expressed in The Conservative Mind, what he hearkened back to through the long sweep of American history, really captured in the ideals enshrined in the Declaration of Independence, and then framed in the Constitution of the United States. Those are all still the foundation of the conservative movement today. It is a belief in a strong national defense. It is a belief in limited government as defined by the Constitution. It is an unapologetic belief in traditional values, the sanctity of life and the traditional family. And now, we've added to that, I think during our administration, we changed the national consensus on China. I think the vast majority of Americans now recognize that China is the greatest economic and strategic threat to the United States. I think we conveyed a truth that border security is national security, and we introduced the notion that trade can be free, but it also has to be fair to American workers. And in the wake of that, we negotiated the largest trade deal in American history. So I think we built on the foundation that was poured before, but there are many who say that foundation isn't there anymore. And as you suggested, Jeff, I often have been referred to as a Reagan conservative. I was truth be told, I was a Democrat until Ronald Reagan made it to the White House. I was the Youth Democrat Party coordinator in Bartholomew County, Indiana in 1975. I was kind of a community organizer. But when I heard Ronald Reagan, it's like Betsy just said, I heard the values I was raised on, faith and family and a commitment to freedom and patriotism. And I joined the Reagan Revolution and never looked back. But I believe that what Russell Kirk articulated and kind of rebirthed in the minds of the American people in the 1950s, that Barry Goldwater then carried when he was our standard bearer, Ronald Reagan carried, and Republicans have carried ever since, all the way through the Trump administration. I believe that foundation is still there, and I believe that conservative agenda still holds the keys to bring our nation all the way back, and then some.
Totally agree. So I get to ask a question now. Faith is essential to both of our lives. What can we say to the rising generation of conservatives unsure of the real essential connection of religion and conservatism? And why is it, in fact, the very core of conservatism?
Well, first, it's a point upon which you and our families have connected, and I just so admire that you're a woman of integrity, and your faith has shown through in your devotion to America's children. I mentioned it before, but I must tell you, I think we are in a moment where education freedom is breaking out all over the country, and your love for America's children and your faith has been a driving force behind that, Betsy. I want to thank you again. For me, I would say to any young person that wants to say, well, we need to move past talking about issues, values issues that maybe emanate out of a great and rich tradition of faith in America, is that the truth is, with some distinguished faith leaders in the room tonight, the freedom of religion was our first freedom in America. And in a very real sense, I really believe that when you think about American greatness, it was our faith in God, our freedom, and our vast natural resources that created the most prosperous and powerful nation the world has ever known. But it all began with that freedom of religion. I mean, the Pilgrims stepped off onto these wilderness shores for one reason, and that was freedom of religion. And a careful study of the American founding, one understands that the reason that the freedom of religion is in the First Amendment is because it was at the very core of what it is to be Americans. And now we have the freedom in this country to believe whatever we choose to believe, or believe nothing at all. And I would fight for the right of any American to have the freedom of conscience and make their own choices. But I think we have to come back to a time in the life of this country where we are affirming the importance of faith to our communities, to our families, to our states, and to our nation. It's the wellspring of our strength.
On this question of the importance of faith and family, maybe Betsy, I'll ask you. Russell Kirk wrote that there is a, quote, deliberate desire of certain people to have the political state assume nearly all the responsibilities which the family once possessed. He points out this starts by, quote, educating the whole child in state schools. Yet some continue to question the capacity of parents to raise their own children. How do you view the parental rights movement as a return to a fundamentally conservative idea?
Well, it is absolutely key in what we now see as a real wave toward education freedom policies across the states, putting parents back in charge of making decisions where their children learn and what they learn. You know, if there was a silver lining to the pandemic, it was that families had a front row seat to see what their children were actually learning. Whether it was their kitchen table or their living room, they saw either an attempt at distance learning that was so feeble and meager and so non-robust, or they saw curriculum that was absolutely antithetical to their family's values. That's been there before, but they never had exposure to it in that way. And so this has really turned on mama bears in particular, but parents across the country. And you see in states where state legislators have actually said, you know, parents shouldn't be allowed to make these decisions for their children. They don't know their children nearly as well as teachers. In fact, my successor just tweeted that the other day, said that we should be listening to teachers. They know them better than anyone. I tweeted back that he misspelled parents, but. But Russell Kirk wrote about this, 65 years ago, he was writing about this very issue, and we've seen how many ways kids have been indoctrinated and how the system has really usurped parental rights and responsibilities. And so this momentum that has built because of the revealings of COVID is, I hope and I believe it's unstoppable, and that's the absolute right thing for every family today, but also for our future. I mean, think about the generation that is trying to navigate young adulthood today, having come through a system that has not taught them how to think, how to debate ideas, how to be comfortable with someone else's opinion, even though you might not agree with it yourself. And so I'm very excited to see what has transpired in the last couple of years.
Every year.
Vice President Pence, listening to Betsy, it just made me wonder, if you were president, what kind of education secretary would you look for?
Well, I ran the transition in 2016. So you know the one I was looking for. And we found her.
And if you haven't read my book, go read about the story.
But I'll say something a little counterintuitive, maybe. Look, like John Engler in the back. I've been a vice president, but I've been a governor, and I'm someone that believes in the 10th Amendment. I believe that the powers not specifically enumerated and delegated to the federal government are reserved to the states and the American people. And I'd like to see us shut down the federal Department of Education and send those resources back where states can innovate and expand educational freedom for all of our kids.
Back to a sort of founding principles question. The whole question of limited government is on the table with a lot of conservatives, especially in the Senate. These days, there's major senators that are now questioning whether or not that a commitment to limited government might be a little too naive in our time, because it is insufficiently strong to promoting the common good, holding back the woke onslaught. How do we reassert the merits of limited government in this climate?
Well, first and foremost, I really do believe that free enterprise and the free market has created the greatest standard of living in the history of the world. And ensuring and preserving limited government is an essential element to preserving the free market. That being said, I think the advent in recent years of what came to be known as ESG rules in investing was a pernicious effort to literally circumvent the political process and bring liberal environmental, social, and governance standards into investment decisions in some of the major investment firms in New York City, firms that literally control trillions of dollars of Americans' pensions and investment dollars. And in many cases, this was using corporate decision-making to advance a liberal social agenda that they couldn't advance in the political realm. And so I've been an advocate over the last 2 years of taking a strong stand. I mean, investment should follow the highest rate of return under the law as a function of fairness to Americans and to all those shareholders of these corporations, and nothing further. And we need to drive ESG out of investment decisions in America. Let's have these debates in the political realm. Let's have these debates in our state legislatures. Let's have them in the Congress and in national campaigns. But this business of advancing a liberal agenda through boardrooms, through tying investment, in fact, tying access to financing to a liberal agenda known as ESG is just antithetical to the American experience. Lastly, I would say that the most powerful force in America is the American people. And I have to tell you, I couldn't be more enthusiastic at the way the American people have begun to stand up unapologetically for traditional values, just call Budweiser and ask them how Bud Light is doing. The American people are letting their voice be heard. And they're letting places like Target and even the Dodgers with MLB. I'm not a big tweeter. I've been around bigger tweeters in my time. But I have to tell you, I had to tweet today because you have a situation where the Dodgers, I mean, they were acknowledging that it's Pride Month, and literally invited a group that is abjectly anti-Catholic to come and participate in Dodger Stadium, and they literally canceled them against objections, and then they just invited them back. And I must say, there is no place in America's pastime for religious bigotry, and the MLB ought to stand down and stand up for religious freedom. But that's an example, I think, it's an example, I think, of the power of the marketplace. I'm not a supporter of using the coercive power of the state to punish corporations that don't hold to my political views. I'm not a fan of that, and I can't support it. But pushing back on ESG and unleashing the strength and force of the American people in the American marketplace will set this nation right.
Totally agree with everything you said, and would just add that after having had the experience of running a large federal agency, the size and scale of the federal government is just way overgrown, and conservatives have to resist the idea that when we are in office or in power, that we turn around and double down on mandating things from the federal level that are inappropriate and are overreach and overstep. We've had a tendency to do that in some areas. I will say unequivocally, we did not do that at the Department of Education. There was nothing we did that was beyond anything specifically required by Congress through law, and we were very careful about that. And in fact, I think I was the only agency that left with 20% fewer people on staff by design. But this notion that these administrative agencies take law passed by Congress and then extend it into areas way, way, way beyond the scope and scale of the law, it happens all the time when liberals are in power. We have to resist the notion when conservatives are in power, and we need to fight back and actually address this notion of federalism and the respect for states and what they can be as the laboratories of democracy.
Following and veering off slightly, I had a question about the American dream. There's a lot of despairing talk on the right these days about America. Your father had some advice to you that you recount in your wonderful memoir, which I highly recommend. It's such a great survey of the last 20 years of American public life. So help me God. And
that's the title.
That is, yes, yeah. And so help me God, it is a great survey of the last 20 years of political life. In there, you say that your father gave you great advice about climbing your own mountain. When it comes to the American dream, Vice President Pence, can we still climb our own mountain?
Well, the short answer is yes, but preserving and expanding the American dream should be the obligation of every freedom-loving American. There are some, we're on the campus of an extraordinary American family that's lived that dream. There are other storied Michigan families that have started with literally nothing, represented in this room, that built extraordinary opportunities for millions of people around the world. I mean, I would say to you, the American dream is live and well, but we have to recommit ourselves to the principles of limited government and freedom to ensure the American dream survives for future generations. And I'm committed in my heart of hearts to be a part of it because my family's lived the American dream. My grandfather stepped off on a boat onto Ellis Island in 1923. Richard Michael Cawley came from Ireland. And that's how Richard Pence got to be Vice President of the United States. My grandfather drove a bus for 40 years in Chicago, the proudest man I ever knew. He raised this precocious redhead who's 91 years young today. And she married a combat veteran, and they went down in a small town in Indiana, and they built everything that matters. A family, a business, and a good name. And but my father said to us, as I recounted in my book, that for each and every one of us, it was never going to be us joining into what they had done in their lives. It was about climb your own mountain. And what Betsy just talked about in terms of the administrative state is one of the greatest barriers to the American dream and to people accessing the opportunity to live out their dreams than maybe anything else. You know, we passed the largest tax cuts and tax reform in American history, but I think the fact that we cut more federal red tape than any administration in history had a bigger impact on American prosperity and preserving the American dream. And I must tell you, I'm proud that we have a majority on the Supreme Court today that is wise to the administrative state.
Yeah.
And Justice Neil Gorsuch is one of the great scholars about reconsidering what's called the Chevron decision and reconsidering the overreach that Betsy just described so well of the administrative state. So while I believe the American dream is alive and well today, and anyone here, particularly young people that have a dream in your heart and want to step out, don't hesitate to do it. And you'll find how many people want to come alongside and help you live that dream. And I must tell you, to ensure that that dream remains vital, we have to hew to our roots of conservatism in this country, because the larger the state grows, the smaller the American dream will grow. But I want a boundless American dream for future generations, and I'll always fight for it, I promise you.
That's great. Well, we're coming down to the home stretch here. This part of the program, maybe a couple more questions, quick ones, we'll make them.
Is this a lightning round?
This is a little bit of a lightning round. Yeah, and this will be lightning for both of you. Well, thunder and lightning. Both of you are Midwesterners, right? So this is a question on sort of a Midwest question. Russell Kirk wrote as a Midwesterner. We have a local president, President Ford, who governed as a Midwesterner. John Engler, our state, governed as a Midwesterner. You have Vice President Pence. What are some of the Midwestern values that you both think are especially relevant for our time and that you cherish the most?
I'll take that one first. I would say everybody always talks about West Michigan nice. And I think West Michiganders generally are known as wanting to be very nice people. They want to be liked. And that's great. It's great to be nice, but you also have to be tough at the right time, and you can be tough and nice all together. I remember many a dinner table conversation about policy and politics. Contrary to your family, we had a lot of those discussions. And I started to learn about the combination of being both tough and nice, and I think those are values that can be well utilized well beyond West Michigan.
Spoken from one of the toughest and nicest people I've ever met in my life. Anybody else agree with that? I think that's very. Look, I always said of people of Indiana, and it's equally true of people in Michigan and all across the heartland, is we're a people with strong hearts and strong opinions, right? And we usually express them civilly and respectfully to one another. And when I think of the Midwest, I think of that. I think that it isn't that people here don't have strong convictions. It's just that one of their convictions is that I should do unto others as I would have them do unto me. To speak firmly, clearly about my values, but to show respect to one another. It's something that I actually think is characteristic of the vast majority of the American people. You know, sometimes, particularly the last 2 years, it's easy to feel down about the country, to feel like we're very divided, and we live in a contentious time and a challenging time for families. And people sometimes ask me, you know, if the country is the way it is what it was once before. And I often say to people, look, I think the people of this country are the most freedom-loving, faith-filled, generous, innovative, hardworking, patriotic people the world has ever known. We just got to have a government as good as our people again. The challenge that we have is those values, those heartland values need to trickle up in the government, both in the way we deal with one another, but the conviction, as Betsy said, the conviction, the willingness to be tough and to stand firm. I was always struck by that about Russell Kirk when I met him. I was struck by that about Ronald Reagan as well. I met President Reagan in 1988, and there was a gentleness about both men that struck me, because I associated them with a steel spine and a willingness to stand their ground and never move. But when I encountered both of them personally, one in the White House and one in Indiana when he visited us, I found a gentleness, and I think there's some wisdom in that, and maybe there's some prudence in that as well. I don't think we have to choose between the courage of our convictions and being decent to one another. And frankly, I believe that when we produce leadership in this country that can do both, we'll marshal strong majorities in state houses around the country and city halls and in Washington, D.C., because I think that expresses really the character of the American people. Those heartland values are just American values. I believe it with all my heart.
Well, there's just so much wisdom in what you just offered us. Thank you for your time, your wise and wonderful words, your prudential statesmanship. When I look at the title, The Politics of Prudence, and I looked on the landscape the last 10, 20 years, Mike Pence's name is right up in lights as somebody who embodies everything Dr. Kirk talks about is in the Politics of Prudence. You are, somebody who embodies it, and what you walk that walk at the highest level in America, and we're just so grateful for you, and we're grateful that you spent this time together, and Betsy's so wonderful to sit next to you and talk together with Vice President Pence, and now I'm going to let you both go on with your evening, and hopefully stay. We got a little bit left from a Kirk Center point of view here, a little video and an announcement from the Kirk Center, but I know the two of you have places to go. So we thank you for the time you have shared with us.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Jeff.
you all.
Thank you.
The American conservative tradition is one of the most deeply held American set of principles. Those principles today have been lost or distorted. That's especially true on college campuses where there's a lack of intellectual diversity, where the ratio of faculty, whether it's Democrats to Republicans, conservatives to liberals, is very wide. The time is now to really take charge of a conservative education in America, and the Russell Kirk Center is planning to do so by launching a new school of conservative studies in Mecosta, Michigan. Mecosta is the perfect place, the ideal place, the natural place for this new school of conservative studies to launch. Russell Kirk wrote The Conservative Mind and many other books in Mecosta, the birthplace in many ways for the intellectual tradition and movement in America is Mecosta, Michigan. For more than 50 years, Mecosta has been hosting students, professors, journalists, emigres from around the world during the Cold War who came to learn more about conservatism, who've come to Mecosta because that's the place where the conservative mind was articulated. So let's go learn conservatism where conservatism was forged. And so seminars, fellows have been staying in residence, and it's been kind of an academic community for many years. The Mecosta campus, where the School of Conservative Studies will be held, is a collection of buildings, cottages mainly, as well as a nationally recognized library of more than 15,000 volumes. And after 30 years, the Russell Kirk Center is now realizing an early dream of Russell Kirk, who talked decades ago about the need for a school of conservative studies. And today we're able to realize that dream. We will realize that dream and launch the new school, which is really comprised of a serious conservative curriculum, which will be both residential in Mecosta, and we'll be leveraging the Mecosta experience online using new technologies, new micro-credentials, and other ways to validate knowledge and extend it beyond our physical campus. Alexis de Tocqueville once said that every new generation is a fresh people. We have an obligation then to connect each new generation to the best that has been thought and said in America, to connect them to the fundamental principles and ideals, the beliefs, the practices and institutions that are uniquely American so that they can make them their own and pass them on to their children and their children's children. That's the educational mission of the Russell Kirk Center. That's the educational mission of the School of Conservative Studies. I ask you to visit kirkcenter.org. There you'll learn more about our plans moving forward. We ask your support and your prayers. Thank you. All right, we promised to announce something. And now you know the announcement, a new Kirk Center initiative we wanted to unveil for the first time this evening. What a perfect segue. I mean, I couldn't imagine a more wonderful way to launch this new initiative than the conversation we just had with Vice President Pence and Secretary DeVos. Secretary DeVos, you're still here. Thank you. And so thank you for being with us. This is great. Well, very briefly, because of the cultural and educational circumstances that we are all familiar with, contemporary students have little exposure to serious conservative thought. What's particularly distressing to me is that even many young conservatives now question or reject the political, economic, and religious legacy of the American founding. Generations are losing touch with the miracle of Philadelphia. There is then an urgent need for learning experiences that engage intellectual conservatism at its best. The various elements of our new School of Conservative Studies will work together to cultivate in students an allegiance to core American beliefs. It will create a network of students, professors, professionals, specifically high school teachers, lawyers, and political leaders. The design will feature a series of integrated programs providing an education in conservatism, both its key ideas and its imaginative dimensions. It will feature expert thinkers that connect students to timeless ideals, as well as show how the American conservative tradition can help us address practical and urgent dilemmas. Ours is a living conservatism. We study the past for wisdom and with a view towards shaping the world we live in. Most students do not have access to conservative professors and mentors that can guide them on their civic responsibility to lead in the struggle for their survival and renewal of the American Republic. They need to go off campus, sometimes pretty far off campus, to experience a course with a conservative professor and connect to a unique historical place. Connecting students to great professors and engaging ways to articulate our cultural heritage is a chief aim of the new School of Conservative Studies. We will accomplish this through an expanded program at our Mecosta campus and a complementary new online educational effort. Russell Kirk championed a conservatism of community, connection, and place. A conservatism anchored first and foremost in an acknowledgement that a transcendent order or natural law rules society as well as conscience. Politics is downstream, as we know, from this moral order that guides us. And a healthy politics also depends on the vitality of those mediating institutions formed to protect and advance the high place of what Kirk called the permanent things: church, family, schools, local civic and related associational life. Students are more alienated from the ultimate truth of things and disconnected from traditions and community experiences that give meaning to their lives than almost ever before. Spending time at the Kirk Center has been one chance for many students to perceive another way. They find connection, community, conversation and fellowship and friendship, learning and hospitality. There is no substitute in our time for such personal experiences. No matter the technical wizardry that surrounds us, as with the gospel, these truths are still best spread person to person. To that end, we will be renovating and expanding our campus footprint in the village of Mecosta, currently 8 buildings, possibly 10 by the end of next year. This is the place where the best kind of transformations occur. Acknowledging this truth still, it is obvious that not everyone will make it to Mecosta or the select campuses we are able to program on today. And so we will enter more ambitiously into the online space, creating and delivering courses that can lead to intellectual growth in that way, too. Before coming back home to Michigan last January, I spent some of the past 7 years developing online courses, new micro-credentials, and user-friendly course delivery platforms. I appreciate the ways in which this is a promising time to launch this school. In many ways, we are entering the Wild West of education reform, and we're living in the midst of a credentials craze. More than ever, colleges and employers are recognizing independent certification programs. Across the board, the popularity of short-term certification programs is on the rise. As many of you know, Gen Z and millennials prefer to customize their education and to their needs. They have a playlist or a la carte approach to learning. While this presents certain challenges, it also suggests new opportunities for delivering more of the kind of coherent and meaningful educational experiences needed for their worldview formation. We plan to engage the possibilities of the moment to develop a more focused, sequential program of conservative studies, offering a range of courses from introductory to advanced in Mecosta and online, and in both ways offer new credentials that students and professionals find resume-worthy. In addition to our mostly student audience, the Kirk Center also has 3 professional areas of educational focus. First, our Pillars of American Order program for high school teachers that provides continuing education through the study of America's place within a larger envelope of Western civilization and how to teach teachers to communicate that to their students. Second, the Center's Society of Law and Culture program, formed by Detroit attorney and philosopher Max Goss, who is with us tonight. Our Society of Law and Culture is an organization that joins lawyers, judges, professionals, and academics together to discuss themes that can foster a renewed appreciation of the law's role in cultural formation and renewal. And third, we recently held an inaugural conference for state legislators in Mecosta on statesmanship and American conservatism. State Senator Thomas Elbert of Lowell is here tonight, and you heard State Representative Brad Paquette earlier this evening. Representative Rochelle Smith is here as well. this evening. Together, these young representatives and senators represent a principled, dynamic, and optimistic new generation of conservative leaders. Their intention is to launch a new network or association for political leaders and public policy professionals in Michigan and the Midwest. A symposium dedicated to civil discussion of important ideas and then putting those ideas into action. I mean, these were amazing legislators, took time out of their busy schedule to spend 4 days reading the Federalist Papers, talking about the problem of factions then and now, reading Burke, reading Kirk, reading about Churchill, Tocqueville, Lincoln, modern reformist conservatives, economic liberals. It was quite an amazing weekend together, and their plans are so encouraging. And wilderness years are really famous for producing terrific stuff over the long run. So you guys are, you have vision, and it's such a promising future. And we're grateful to partner with you. Each of these professional areas demonstrate that the Kirk Center's network is more than faculty. These professionals will enhance the aims of the School of Conservative Studies. Participants will benefit educationally, and importantly, they will serve to link the generations by serving as a resource for younger conservatives who aspire to careers in those professions. The brochure that was passed out to you captures a lot of this. It's a very conceptual brochure. It spares a lot of details, planning details. We merely hope to give you tonight an idea of how and what we are planning to do to ensure our part in ensuring fresh generations have a sound view of genuine American conservatism. As Vice President said, an unhyphenated and intellectually capacious American conservatism. As part of this effort, I also want to announce that we will be opening a Grand Rapids office this year. Even though we are just an hour north on 131, and as Annette says, you're always welcome to join us, the distance seems pretty far for many residing in this part of West Michigan. Having more of a local presence will make it easier to bring some part of our educational program to a variety of groups here. In doing so, we hope to forge a closer association locally for the Kirk Center, making the distance between Mecosta and here seem shorter. One conservative scholar told me after reviewing the idea of the Kirk Center School of Conservative Studies, quote, that it seems clear that a tangible outcome from a venture such as this will be. Thomas Jefferson understood that the University of Virginia would infuse into American and state politics well-educated leaders who were widely or liberally educated. Such leaders are exactly what American politics and culture need today. Near the end of one of his best-known books, The Roots of American Order, Russell Kirk spoke about the high calling of citizenship. He noted that his book had sketched the principal features of the American order of the United States as it was inherited and developed upon. And he concluded, hopefully, that a new generation may yet renew that order's structure and improve it. And he said, quote, with prudence and love in God's own good time. Thank you for joining us on this historic night for the Russell Kirk Center. I want to thank our sponsors, which we've been flashing on the board, and there's back there. Please look at them and thank them if you can. Again, there are 30th anniversary flyers of the Politics of Prudence out in the back. As Vice President Pence noted, it's the 30th anniversary and it's being reprinted, and there are flyers in the back, so we encourage you to take that and order a copy if you're interested. Thank you again, Betsy, for being with us. And I now get to release all of you, so this is a happy moment, to go back to hospitality, enjoy some wine, festivity, a little music, and fellowship, and hospitality, which is something we love to do in Mecosta. Thank you and good night.